how to center your clock spring or take off steering wheel for 50 stinking cents. Step number 0, take a break, which I should be doing right now. Step number 1, make sure the steering wheel and the front wheels are centered and the car's parked somewhere, I don't know, safely. Step number 2, disconnect both battery terminals from the battery posts and make sure they won't retouch. Put a block of wood beneath, on top of the battery, whatever. They may be off for a while. Then touch them together. If they can't easily reach and touch together, use a jumper cable, the same side, the black or the white side of two ends of a jumper cable. Touch them together, connect them together for 15 seconds minimal. Then put them all down where they won't retouch the battery and put your stuff away and stuff. Do whatever you do. Close the hood, don't close the hood, whatever. Step number 3, airbag. Some people say use a 4 Allen wrench. There's 4 holes in there and they're facing back like this. You'll see them very easily when you look back right where my finger is. They're facing in on this diagonal and that diagonal and so on and so on. A lot of people say use 4mm Allen hex wrench. Some people say I had a better luck with 3/16, which is 4.79 millimeters. I chose a thing in the middle. I chose 4.5. It worked anyway. Click it in, push it in. Most people say start with the bottom hole, push it in until you feel three things that can click. Try to feel the one in the middle. Once you're pushing on that, move the Allen wrench. It was parallel. There's a little guided, sort of a guided shaped thing here. But once you touch that thing in the middle, the lever in the middle, and you have some pressure on it so the Allen wrench won't slip off, then pull the Allen wrench a little more this way. It was like this, pull it a little more like that. And push on this lever if you can. It may help to be pulling out on the bottom of this thing, even the center of the bottom of it while you're doing that. And if you happen to catch that lever, it might take 5 minutes, might take 5 hours, then that will go clunk, and that you'll see the bottom of this pop out a little bit. Do the same thing here when you got, without accidentally pushing this one in, when you got the whole bottom of it out, put a big piece of thin wood or a ruler or a flat wrench that's longer than this, and wiggle it up there until it's up there snugly so it won't fall out. Then the bottom will not reattach itself when you're working on the top. To the top, if you get one out of the top, that might take another Calpa or something, maybe a neon. Maybe just a neon, not a Calpa. I'm exaggerating. So neon's a million years. So after you spend a million years getting this one out, put another popsicle stick or another Allen wrench, a different Allen wrench up here, and wiggle it in there so it's not going to fall out. So this one will accidentally pop in when you're working on the fourth one. When you get the fourth one out, the whole airbag will pop out in your hand. It's got some weight and it's connected by delicate wires behind it, so you don't want to take it too far. You can move it out a little bit, tilt it, and then unplug the wires behind it. A couple of wires are square. They have a pincher thing. Another one's a slide out thing. Another one's a little wire that goes to a Phillips screw. And once you got it all out, don't point the airbag at yourself. Put it somewhere far away, pointing not at you, back seat, whatever. Now you're at step number 4, which is this bolt in the center of the steering wheel. It's a 50T adapter. You could buy one from Advanced Auto. You'd have to return it if you want to do this all for 50 cents. You know, this is not exactly the best hex 50T bolt I ever used. I'd like my money back. It's the least you could do. That kind of thing. I just kept it, but you got to keep it in the 50-cent range. Do that. Once you take that nut off, you know, have a ratchet wrench. You may have 50 pounds of torque on it or something. Once it moves a little bit, you can go with your hand, put it somewhere where you won't lose it. Spray the thing with, I don't know if this is a good idea. That's what I did. Spray it with some lubricant spray around the threads, because getting the steering wheel off, it's just a flat thing going into a flat hole like this. So there's a round thing in there and a round hole, and you're pulling the steering wheel straight off of that thing can take forever. It can be very difficult. It could be very easy, but it's usually quite difficult. You could rent a steering wheel puller, but that will not do for 50 cents. That will not be within the 50-cent margin. And it doesn't necessarily work any better than what I'm about to tell you. I was banging on it like this. Some people say banging on it like this just to knock any rust loose or whatever. Eventually you got to start banging on it going towards you, because that's what you're doing, pulling the steering wheel toward you. And I put a flat strong piece of metal on top of this. What's left when the airbag's on is this flat piece of metal. On top of it went a non-delicate part of the metal and fed it through, pretty much straight lined it through behind the steering wheel, and was banging on it conking on it with a 10-pound hammer. And I did the same thing with the top and the bottom a couple times. But what finally worked, ironically, was putting my right hand here, my left hand here, and doing these hammer-like do-do-do-do-do. And since they must be tiny motions, because this thing has almost no wiggle ability, big motions will do nothing but maybe tighten it up or push the other side back in, and it certainly won't come out. It might tighten it somehow. Small hammering motions, revolving right to left. And since you have two hands, if you probably have two hands, you can very quickly go right, left, right, left, 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 left. It's way better than cocking out a million times in one direction, because that's just making the thing go like this and get stuck. It's got a 1,000,000 inch of play, but not a 1,000th of an inch. Once you're at a 1,000th inch, you're just wedging things in, making it worse. So you want small, sharp movements. One hand, you can tilt the steering wheel towards you, recline the seat, and make so your arms are, you could even turn your whole body into it, like to help you pull on it. But these are sharp. This is not a pull like, can I pull 200 pounds or 150 pounds, whatever. These are do, and revolving very quickly, back and forth, right, left. You can do that much quicker than moving a hammer back and forth and back and forth. And you can do that 100 times really quick, and each time I'll move it 1/100th of a millionth of an inch, and all of a sudden you'll see the thing moving out. And when it finally comes out in that fashion, you won't accidentally punch yourself in the face with it. It's the quickest and safest way to move it out, at least when I did it a couple days ago. Then the steering wheel comes out and you're left with the clock spring. Step number 5. Clock spring, there's these two big flat pieces of plastic behind it. This thing pops out like nothing. The one on the behind it's got some screws in it. Might have 1, 2, or 3 7mm screw. Unscrew the screw with a socket, put it somewhere where you won't lose it, because you always lose things like that when you're doing this shit. The bottom one you don't have to take completely out, just take it out where it's like this and hanging out to get out of the way of the clock spring, because the next step is the clock spring's got a tab here, 4 tabs. You just, without breaking the plastic, you just lift the plastic over each tab, and then the clock spring pops out. It has to pop out enough to slide out enough so that it's out of this same cylindrical hole I was talking about before, to the point where it can turn. There's a back part of the clock spring that's a little bigger than the middle part towards you. You got to slide out enough where the middle part can turn on the big part, and that's where you do the adjustment. Once you've done all of that and slid the thing out enough and you see that this thing's turnable, then you turn the middle clock spring. There's an arrow on it and there's an arrow on the top. You're centering it because it's probably accidentally turned if you disconnected steering linkage or the steering wheel or something. So right now, the arrows might be lined up, but it might be a complete revolution or 2 off. So this is why you're centering it. And if they're not centered, they will be later, once you do this. The centering is very simple. You take the small one, you move it to the right as much as you can, which won't take long. It'll take anywhere between 1 and 5 turns, or whatever your clock spring has this amount of turns. It'll go, you have to be delicate. It's a delicate piece of plastic. It'll go, it'll stop on the far right. Now you're ready to count it. You count how many turns there were. On mine, there happened to be 5, but anyone's could be different. Count it. Let's say there were 5. You have your count. Let's say there were 8. You have your count. Once you got your count from far right where you stopped to begin to the far left, now you have the full level of turns, turnability that it has. I forgot the word of that. I forgot there's an easy word for that. But screw it, man. Enough babble. You have that number. You divide that number in half and you turn it back in that amount. Mine was 5 turns, so I turned it back 2.5 times. And the 2 arrows were lined up, as it should be. Then you apply this thing back in so it can't turn. Snap it. Snap those things carefully, each one of those things. Slide this thing. There's a thing here that you can unplug, but you don't need to unplug it. Then you slide the big plastic thing on the bottom, and this thing on top, you put that 7-inch bolt back, and now you're back where you were. You feed any wires back through the steering wheel, which you should have fed through before you took the steering wheel off. Hope if I didn't say that, someone has enough common sense for that. Then you slide the steering wheel once the wires are safely through it and all the way through, no fold behind it. Then you slide the steering wheel back over that hole. Then you take that 50-inch thing, you tighten it up. I don't know what the torque is. I heard 50 foot-pounds or less, but I don't know what it is. Torque the thing on. Definitely finish every single, well, first, yeah, that's right. And take any wires that you need to attach through the steering wheel this way too before you do it. Attach the steering wheel, attach any wire to the steering wheel. I think there's a little Phillips wire thing on a screwdriver. And in whatever order, but just make sure the wires are first through before you tighten the bolt. Tighten the bolt if this thing is done. Then you take the airbag, which is in your back seat or up here, whatever. Hold it right here, attach all the wires to it. Make sure the wires are all through the steering wheel. Attach them to the airbag. Snap the airbag on, piece of cake, 5 seconds to snap it on. But make sure you tighten that bolt and do everything before you put the airbag on, or it's another 5 hours of work to take this off first. And That's it, then you're done.